Two of Gonzaga's key starters forgot to bring their basketball games with them to New York, leading to Gonzaga's second straight loss and another disappointing showing against the UConn Huskies.
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Happy Monday, and welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Today's episode of Locked On Zags is brought to you by FanDuel. Folks, place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win. Just visit FanDuel.com today to get started. Well, Gonzaga never recovered from a 13-2 start from the UConn Huskies on Saturday evening. Second straight loss for the Zags, third straight loss against UConn in the last couple of years. We're going to talk about the good that we saw in this game. There was some good, I promise. We're also going to talk about the not so good. Spend a little bit more time on that. The disappointing performances from some of Gonzaga's key players, some which have been an issue throughout the season. We'll talk about Gonzaga's defense, some other things of that nature as well. Review our 5 keys to victory and what Gonzaga did and didn't accomplish in this game on Saturday. We'll close out the show talking about the Zag women's team who stopped a 4-game skid and took a comfortable 29-point win over Eastern Washington. And then on Tuesday's show, we're going to get into the AP rankings, where the Zags are at in that conversation, and answer some of the mailbag questions some of you had about this team, their ceiling, the starting lineup, etc., etc. Lots to get to. And then, of course, we got a couple of games this week for the Zags to hopefully get back in the win column against Nichols and Bucknell. We'll talk about those games later in the week as well. All right, the Zags, first time losing back-to-back games since December of 2018. And it's interesting, the parallels between the last time Gonzaga lost 2 games and this time. The last time that this happened was in mid-December, just like it was here. It was against an SEC team first in Tennessee, just like it was here against Kentucky. And then it was a road game against a blue blood. This was not obviously a true road game for Gonzaga against UConn at Madison Square Garden, but it was a pseudo road game. It's a place that UConn's much more familiar with than Gonzaga. And back in 2018, Gonzaga played and lost a true road game to North Carolina. That one was in Chapel Hill. So the last time this happened, situation was similar. They played back-to-back very, very good teams. They lost both games in very close fashion. The second one was all the way out on the East Coast after losing a game closer to home. And the good news, if you're into that kind of thing, that season Gonzaga went to the Elite Eight. Now, that team had All-American Rui Hachimura on it. It had superstar Brandon Clark on it. Like, that was a really, really good team. But it's worth noting that 2 back-to-back losses to really good teams doesn't necessarily end your season prematurely. Now, are there things Gonzaga does not look good enough right now to be a Sweet 16, or probably a Sweet 16, but Elite 8 Final Four team? Yeah, there's things they need to work on. Don't get me wrong. We're not going to say, oh, well, 6 years ago, the Zags made the Elite 8 after losing 2 straight, so this team will too. That team had some things on it that this team doesn't have, but it's still at least worth acknowledging that the season's not over. We're not packing it in just yet. Having said all that, this was a rough one. Gonzaga has really struggled against the UConn Huskies. Now, most teams have. Teams won back-to-back national championships for a reason, but this just never felt like a game Gonzaga was seriously in. They went down 13-2 early. They had a 13-5 deficit in the first few minutes of the second half. Some of that is coaching. If you're not ready to go, if your guys aren't kind of coming up for it at the start of a game, at the start of a second half, that means the other team's doing something you're not expecting. And I think that's what was so frustrating to watch. It happened in both halves in this game. I said we'll talk about the good, so let's start with the good. Khalif Battle had an awesome game for Gonzaga, and they needed every single bit of it. 21 points for him. He had 4 rebounds, 2 assists, and a steal. He didn't get in foul trouble, as has been an issue for him in the past. He didn't commit dumb turnovers, which has been an issue for him in the past as well. He wasn't very efficient on 2-pointers. He was just 2 of 6 on those 2-point attempts, but he was 4 of 6 from 3. He was 5 of 6 from the free throw line. Jason Benetti, my guy, he's the Detroit Tigers play-by-play announcer. Some of you know I'm a Detroit Tigers fan, so I like Jason Benetti. I was happy to have him on the call, but he freaking jinxed our guy, and that was hard to watch. He said, oh, Khalif Battle hasn't missed a free throw. This guy's automatic, while he misses his second on his last free throw attempt of the game. Battle's season starting, I think he ended up being 40 so in a row before he missed that one. Regardless, still a really nice game from Battle. His family was in town. He's from New Jersey. It was nice to see him play well in front of a home crowd. We know he's capable of being Gonzaga's leading scorer, their best player, certainly on the offensive end at least. And I thought that he looked like that player in this game for the Zags. Also got to give a shout out to Michael Ajayi. Really nice game from him. That's been the conversation about Michael Ajayi is he hasn't really looked comfortable in the offense. He hasn't seemed like he quite grasps his role. Foul trouble has been an issue for him, and so he hasn't been able to play as much. Ben Gregg's been kind of passing him on the depth chart, even though Michael's still starting. Ben was playing more minutes, but in this game, Michael really played well. 14 points and 6 rebounds. He only played 24 minutes. Foul trouble was still an issue. He had 3 fouls in this one, which is partially what limited him to just 24 minutes of action, but he didn't miss a shot. 6 of 6 from the field for 14 points. He also knocked in a pair of free throws as well, was in the right spot at the right times, had the first points of the game for the Zags. Like just really, really solid performance from him. If both these guys in particular are starting to find their way, starting to feel more comfortable, and 35 combined points on efficient shooting between the Gonzaga's 2 new transfers, that's a really promising sign for this team. It's hard to find a lot of positives out of this game. But the way that Khalif Battle and Michael Ajayi both played is a good sign that they are feeling more comfortable in the system, in the offense, in what they're being asked to do. And that could be really good news for the Zags going forward this season. Also got to give a shout out to Ryan Nembhard, 16.7 assists and a pair of steals for him. He played the entire game. Wasn't the most efficient night for him. He was 1 of 4 on 3. He was 5 of 11 on the 2-pointers. But what I loved from Ryan was that he realized at some point in this game, whether it was a coach talking to him or not, I don't know, but he realized I need to take on a bigger scoring role in this game. The bigs were not doing it. We're going to talk about them in a second. Trust me, we're going to talk about them. But he recognized that. So instead of having 8 points and 12 assists or whatever, he scored more. He looked for his shot more. I mean, again, 15 field goal attempts for Ryan Nembhard is extremely rare for him. He still did have his 7 assists. He did have a pair of turnovers, but that's against a good team. Like it's not the end of the world. We're so used to Nembhard being so efficient in that area that 2 turnovers looks like a problematic game, when in reality, 7 assists to 2 turnovers still pretty darn good for any point guard. And I thought this was a nice game for him to take on a role different than what he's typically used to doing and do it well, as we've come accustomed to seeing. And then quickly, Aiden Mahaney, non-factor for UConn. We talked a lot about maybe he's going to finally have a big game against the Zags. Nah, played 8 minutes, 2 points, 1 of 4, 1 assist. Nembhard basically that was when Nembhard just went right at Aiden Mahaney, tried to score on him immediately, to the point where Danny Hurley had to pretty quickly pull Mahaney. That was clearly a game plan. Like, hey, once Aiden's in the game, go at him. Make him play good defense in space. If he can't do it, Danny's going to pull him, and he's not going to get an opportunity to score well against us. And that's exactly what happened. One of the few things that I thought Gonzaga executed well in this game, which leads us to talking about the not so good things. Graham Ike was completely and utterly awful in this game. There's no sugarcoating it anymore. Graham had a slow start to the season. Kind of thought, okay, he's going to come around. Guy was so good last year, was on All-American list. There's no way he's just going to not figure it out. Dominant second half against San Diego State. Okay, Graham's starting to get it around. Couple questionable performances, had some good and bad moments in Atlantis. It's like, all right, well, we'll see. Dominant against Kentucky, particularly in the first half, but really throughout that game. Graham was crucial for the Zags against, again, considered one of the best defensive players in the entire country in Amari Williams. And then he comes out here in this game where the Zags desperately needed him, and he completely doesn't show up. 3 points, 4 turnovers, 4 fouls in 12 minutes. He didn't get a single rebound. He was 1 of 3 from the field. He was 1 of 2 from the free throw line. He didn't have it at all in this game. And if you take away the Kentucky and San Diego State games, Graham's averaging just 11 points, 5.5 boards. He's shooting under 49% from the field, and he's playing just 16.5 minutes per game. People are calling, well, Graham shouldn't play as much, blah, blah, blah. We can talk about the starting lineup if we want to, but at the end of the day, it's not like Mark Few is running Graham out there 35 minutes a night and he's struggling. When Graham's not playing well, he's going to the bench. 16 minutes per game outside of Kentucky and San Diego State. He's not playing all that much. So I think that people it's very reasonably frustrated with Graham. He's not playing well. We expected him to be an All-American candidate. He doesn't look anywhere close to that. But it's not like he's getting rolled out there for he's getting benched when he's not playing well. I think that's what Mark Few and the Zags need to do. It's just a matter of how much longer do we wait for him to turn it around before he doesn't even get opportunities at the beginning of games, before Braden Huff does pass him in the starting lineup. worth acknowledging, Braden Huff wasn't very good in this game either. He missed a bunch of bunnies, which is unusual for him. His defense was pretty atrocious in this game. Like, he didn't look great. And I think if Braden was playing more consistently, maybe that conversation would be even louder than it is right now. But the people who are saying Graham needs to get benched are focusing much more on Graham's struggles and not necessarily Braden's performance, which has been good at times, but hasn't been great at times either. And then the last thing that was really startling in this game and frustrating was the complete disappearing act from Nolan Hickman. I've been a champion of Nolan Hickman. We've talked about him a lot on the podcast. He's gotten a lot of unfair hate and kind of vitriol from the fan base, but this was a game the Zags really needed him, and he wasn't there at all. 12 minutes. He played just 12 minutes in this game. I thought something was wrong. I looked and I haven't seen anything indicating that there was an injury or something like that. I know he's been dealing with some personal issues related to his family that he's been talking about on Instagram. Maybe there was something there. Maybe his head wasn't in it. I'm not sure, but he was 0 of 2 from the field. It's not like he bricked a bunch of shots. He didn't have a bunch of turnovers or anything like that. He just only played 12 minutes. He didn't take any shots from the 3-point line. He had just 1 rebound. He had the foul. Just was not a factor at all in this game. It was shocking how little he played, considering he averaged like 33 minutes a game last year. The beneficiary of that playing time was Dusty Stromer. And if Dusty had a great game, I think we'd be a little less confused about the complete lack of playing time for Nolan Hickman. But Dusty wasn't that great either. He had 4 points and 5 boards. Not terrible, but he was 1 of 5 from the field. He missed all 3 of his 3-point attempts. That's a little bit of regression. He was shooting 52% coming into the season. Folks, I hate to tell you this, Dusty Stromer was never going to finish the season shooting 52% from 3. There was going to be some regression. It was very unfortunate that a clunker of an outside shooting performance from Dusty happened to come in a game where Nolan Hickman was barely playing, and the Zags desperately needed somebody to come off the bench and provide some offense. Dusty was not terrible in this game, but he didn't contribute in the ways that the Zags needed him to, and it was one of the things that cost them an opportunity to win this game. I mentioned Huff and Greg. They combined shot 5 of 14 from the field, 1 of 3 from 3. That means they were a combined 4 of 11 on 2-pointers. 2 of your bigs combined 4 of 11 on 2 is just not going to get it done. They also had 4 combined turnovers and 4 fouls. Just not a good game from basically everybody on this roster, not named Khalif Battle, Michael Ajayi, and to an extent, Ryan Nembhard. Well, one of the interesting things that Gonzaga actually executed a few of the keys that we had laid out prior to this game, and it just didn't end up resulting in a victory, in part because some of the other keys weren't executed nearly as well. We're going to talk about that, what else happened in this game, coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, get ready to tackle all the college hoops action this season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more, all on the same page where you place your bets. Tons of action right now on the games that are coming up Monday and Tuesday. We don't have lines yet for Gonzaga versus Nichols, but when we have a line there, we'll definitely talk about it here. If you like those lines, you like any of the odds, some future odds for the Zags, just visit FanDuel.com to join today. As a reminder, you will get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, folks, segment 2, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast, and we are still talking about Gonzaga's loss on Saturday at the Madison Square Garden to the UConn Huskies, their second straight loss, third loss on the season. We're going to talk about the 5 keys that we laid out in Friday's episode before the game, what we thought Gonzaga needed to do to have some success in this one. And we're going to kind of talk about how those particular keys impacted this game and this result. Key number 1 was to get Samson Johnson and Terrace Reed, the 2 bigs for UConn, who are foul-prone players, try to get them in foul trouble. And look, here's the thing. This was effective, sort of. Samson Johnson only played 6 minutes in this game. He did sit early in the first half because of foul trouble, so that was part of it, but he also suffered an injury and didn't play, I believe, the majority, if not the entire, of the second half. Terrace Reed, the backup center for UConn, who's arguably a better, at least offensive player than Samson Johnson, although not quite as impactful defensively. Reed only played 23 minutes because he committed 4 fouls. If you had told me those 2 numbers after the game, Samson Johnson played 6 minutes, Terrace Reed played 23 minutes, I probably would have guessed that alone is enough for me to believe that Gonzaga wins this basketball game, because those players are so impactful as rim protectors. They're so impactful just as big bodies to prevent Gonzaga's bigs from scoring, and them playing a combined 29 minutes meant that there was big chunks of this game where neither of them were on the floor. They played their third string center, Yusuf Singare. They played some small ball lineups without either of the bigs in. And yet Gonzaga's bigs just could not do anything. We talked about it already. Graham Ike couldn't get a bucket to go. Braden Huff had a rough game. Ben Gregg had a rough game. The only big who played well was Michael Ajayi, and he's not a post. Like the absence of Johnson and Reed didn't really impact Michael Ajayi's performance. Gonzaga couldn't hit the broadside of a barn on attempts that they typically make. Braden Huff's missing bunnies around the rim wide open with his left hand. Like that's just not something that happens. And it's so frustrating to see that happen for a player who is so consistently good at those things and who had really kind of shed that, oh, he doesn't play well against good teams mantra that happened last year. Now 2 back-to-back games for Braden Huff against good teams where he hasn't played all that well. The attention is not on him. It's on Graham Ike, and justifiably so. Even though Graham played great against Kentucky, he really didn't bring it in this game, and he struggled against some inferior opponents earlier in the year. So he's getting the attention for it. But neither of them contributed in this game. And despite Johnson and Reed not being able to play as many minutes as either of them would have liked, it didn't matter. And that's so frustrating for Gonzaga. Key number 2 was to find the outside shot. And here's the thing, the Zags shot 37.5% from 3. That's pretty good. 6 of 16, so they didn't take very many of them. And I think that was an opportunity where they continued to try to force feed the post. They continued to try to run their offense by getting good looks around the rim, and they just missed a bunch of them. Some of it's a credit to UConn's defense. They are very good at holding teams to below average 2-point field goal percentages. So it's not like this is an anomaly for UConn's defense, but Gonzaga shot it well from 3, but they didn't get very many attempts. And realistically, we should put a caveat on this. Gonzaga shot well from the 3-point line because Khalif Battle shot well from the 3-point line. That was really it. Battle was 4 of 6. Every single time he shot, it looked like it was money. He was absolutely on fire in this game. But Khalif Battle going 4 of 6 meant the rest of the team was 2 of 10. Everybody not named Khalif Battle shot 20% combined for 3 in this game. Dusty Strummer was 0 of 3 in a game where they really could have used his hot shooting. Ryan Nembhard was over 40% coming into the game. He was 1 of 4. Ben Gregg was 1 of 2. Braden Huff was 0 for 1. Perhaps most strikingly, Nolan Hickman didn't take a 3-point attempt in his 12 minutes of action. Michael Ajayi did not take a 3-point attempt. Gonzaga was really adamant on trying to score around the rim against a team that defends well on the 2-point line and poorly on the 3-point line. Gonzaga's percentages reflect that, and yet they didn't adjust in a way where they tried to get more 3-point attempts. I think that was a mistake. I think they should have tried to get more 3-point attempts. It's frustrating that Nembhard and Stromer were a combined 1 of 7, because if those guys had looked a little better from beyond the arc, maybe there would have been more comfortability taking more 3-pointers and it could have gotten them back in the game. But I thought the offense was too focused on trying to score. And I get it. I get in the second half with Johnson on the bench why they tried to score around the rim. And it's not like they were getting a bunch of bad looks. I don't know how you fix a team that's getting good shots and just missing them. That's a frustrating thing for a coach. But it felt like there were some other opportunities the Zags didn't take advantage of in this game. Key number 3 was to take care of the basketball. Gonzaga had an unseasonably high 10 turnovers in this contest. It was the culprits that we would have expected. Nembhard had a pair, which is not that surprising, but again, he played a full 40 minutes with the ball in his hands pretty much every single possession, so not a shock there. And then it was the bigs. Michael Ajayi didn't have any turnovers, but Ben Gregg and Braden Huff each had a pair. And then Graham Ike, in his just complete disaster performance, had 4 turnovers in his 12 minutes of action. That was a devastating blow for Gonzaga early in this game and really, really set the tone for why this team was going to struggle to kind of come back and claw back in a game where they were down 11, 2 minutes into the contest. Key number 4 was defensive communication. And honestly, the Zags did a pretty good job here. UConn scored it well in this game, but it wasn't, they scored a lot of points at the free throw line. They didn't shoot it well from 3. And I thought what we saw a lot of the time, which was very frustrating, and this is what UConn is so good at, is they just continue to go at you. Every single possession is an absolute grind defensively. The amount of times in this game where Gonzaga played what I thought was above to well above average defense for 26, 27, 28 seconds. And then there's one slight lapse and a player breaks free on a screen or does a slip screen or something like that and gets a wide open lay-in. It happens so many times. And this is what UConn does. If you watch any other UConn basketball games, this is how they beat teams. is they just bide their time and they wait and they run their actions and they run their side to screen ball screens and they run their double screens and everything that they do, and they wait and they wait and they wait, and then they see a gap and they take it and they score. And it is really hard to defend them and hard to stop them because Gonzaga played good aggressive defense, but UConn takes good care of the ball. They don't turn it over and they get looks pretty much every possession. Really, really frustrating to see Gonzaga do what I thought was a decent job in that. I mean, again, UConn shot 21% from three. Alex Karaban was 0 of 7 from three in this game. Hassan Diarra was 0 of 4, 0 of 11 from two of UConn's best three-point shooters and best players. Were not delivering from that area. But we had possessions where Solomon Ball threw up an absolute trash three-pointer with Dusty Stromer draped all over him in 29 and a half seconds into the clock, and he made it. That happens. Sometimes there's just some bad luck in basketball games. Jalen Stewart threw in one of the ugliest shots I've ever seen, both times on good defensive possessions from Gonzaga. So I think that I didn't include this in the positives because I knew we talked about it here, but I thought Gonzaga's overall defense in this game really was pretty good. They had some lapses. They always do. But 77 points for a good UConn offense and holding them below 21% from three, that's pretty good. It's just that the offense could not deliver in times when they needed him to, and UConn got a few opportunities that they took advantage of, did a good job at the free throw line, and that was enough for them to secure a victory. Key number 5 was for the Zags to play a full 40 minutes, and it's very, very clear that did not happen. They have struggled to play a full 40 minutes throughout the season, a lot of good halves, a lot of good second halves like San Diego State, good first halves like Kentucky. This game, they had some good moments. But in particular, as we said, the first 3 minutes of the first half, they were outscored 13-2. The first 3 minutes of the second half, they were outscored 13-5. That means 19 points in favor of UConn in what was basically a 6 or 7 minute stretch. So Gonzaga outscored UConn in the last 14 or 16 minutes or so of the first half. In the last 16 or so minutes of the second half, Gonzaga outscored UConn by 8 in those huge stretches of this basketball game. But when you don't play at the start of the game, when you don't play at the start of the second half and the team just blitzes you, it's really hard to come back. It's frustrating to look at a game that Gonzaga outscored UConn by 8 points for 35, 34 or so minutes of this game and have it be another loss in the column. But we're going to move on from this game. We're not going to be done with it. I'm sure we'll talk about it again, but we're going to flush it. We're going to get through it. We got 2 not as difficult games coming up for the Zags back at home against Nichols and Bucknell. We'll talk about those games coming up. But for right now, we're going to move on and talk about the Zag women who erased a 4-game losing streak, comfortably defeated the Eastern Washington Eagles at home on Saturday. We're going to talk about a huge game from Yvonne Ejim and new superstar freshman guard Allie Turner. All that coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, it is that time of year. The college football playoff is back. And with the newly expanded 12-team format, it is guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever, bringing you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love. TNT Sports coverage of the college football playoff begins December 21st, starting with the college football playoff kickoff show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern time. Leading into our first matchup, the SMU Mustangs battling the Penn State Nittany Lions at noon. Then the Clemson Tigers look to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern time. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the college football playoff presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. All right, folks, segment 3, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast, and we're moving away from talking about Gonzaga's loss to the UConn Huskies over the weekend to instead talk about Lisa Fortier and the Zag women's basketball team who erased a 4-game losing streak, beat Eastern Washington 79-50 at the McCarthy Athletic Center on Saturday afternoon. Eastern Washington's not good, folks. 2-8 on the year, 0-5 on the road. But this is what this team needed. Just like how Nichols and Bucknell are teams that Gonzaga needs right now to get right, to figure some stuff out before they take on UCLA at the Intuit Dome on December 28th. The men's team needs these games. The women's team needed this game against Eastern Washington because they're about to start conference play after that. They lost those 3 games in the Paradise Jam, and then they lost that road game to Colorado State. But they came out here, were ready to roll, comfortably rolled to this win. Yvonne Ejim was the superstar as we expected her to be. She finished this game with 28 points. She also had 5 assists, 3 rebounds, and 2 steals. Folks, she only played 22 minutes. 22 minutes, and she finishes nearly with 30 points. She was 11 of 14 on 2-point attempts. She did miss her 2 3-point attempts, and she was 6 of 7 from the free throw line. Continuing her quest to be a potential All-American, it's going to be tougher if this Gonzaga team doesn't rebound. successfully from the early season struggles, but man, has she been fantastic for this team this year. I have no doubt that she will continue to be the best player in the WCC, one of the best mid-major players in the country, and she showed exactly why in this performance on Saturday. And if we're looking for a positive for this team outside of Yvonne Ejim, who we know is going to be great, we know was great last year, it's Allie Turner, freshman from St. Louis, Missouri. Got a lot of press before the season and in the exhibitions for how fearless she was, how phenomenal she was playing. She's been excellent. There's a lot of concern for this program. When the Trunk twins departed, Brenda Maxwell's out the door, Liza Hollinsworth's out the door. They lost some other key pieces, Peyton Muma, Callie Stokes, etc. And it was like, who's going to step up and be the big-time guard? They go out, they land Taylor Dalton in the transfer portal from St. Mary's, but she has remained on the bench. She has not been able to play because of injury. Brees Allen Biena has not been able to play. So it was really like, who is going to be the player who steps up? The question's been answered. It's Allie Turner. In this game, she had 19 points and 5 boards. She also had 3 assists, a steal, and a block. She was 2 of 3 on 2-point attempts, 5 of 10 from the 3-point line, continuing to be an elite 3-point shooter. Through her 11 games as a Zag, the first 11 games of her college basketball career as a true freshman, Turner has started 9 of them. She is averaging 33 minutes per night, 14.5 points, 3.7 boards, 3.2 assists. She is averaging 3.1 turnovers, but true freshman, those numbers are going to come down. But the key thing for her is she's one of the best 3-point shooters in the country. Right now, through her first 11 games, Allie Turner is shooting 44.7% from 3. That is on 6.9 3-point attempts per game. She's shooting 7 threes a game and knocking them down about 45% clip. Very few shooters will ever come close to replicating the elite Brenda Maxwell, who shot about 50% in her first full season at Gonzaga. But Turner is on pace to be in that conversation. She leads the WCC in 3-point percentage right now. She leads the WCC in three-pointers made, 3-pointers attempted. She is the best 3-point shooter in this conference, one of the best 3-point shooters in the entire country. She has scored 18 or more points in 5 of her 11 games. She has scored in double figures in 9 of her 11 games. The other 2, she had 9 points in one of them and 4 in the other. She has been one of the best freshmen in the conference, one of the best freshmen in the entire country. And considering she is a true freshman, her ability to be a 4-year potential superstar in this program is absolutely there. And while the season hasn't gone according to plan for the program, there is some absolutely clear signs of success coming for this team. Claire O'Connor, who's a sophomore stepping into her first big role of her career. She had 18 points in this game as well, along with 4 rebounds, 4 assists, and a steal. She was 4 of 5 from beyond the 3-point line. The issue for this team remains depth. And again, injuries to Lauren Whitaker, injuries to Taylor Dalton, injuries to Brees Allen Biena. It remains the story, but this team had just, even in a game where they won comfortably by 30, where Ejim only played 22 minutes, where your starters weren't needing to be on the floor for 30, 32, 35 minutes per game, the bench still only scored 9 points. 70 of the 79 points scored in this game for the Zags were by the starting lineup. The 9 total bench points came on 3 of 14 shooting. The bench also had 8 turnovers and 4 fouls compared to just 3 assists. Inez Betancourt coming off the bench now. She started the season as a starter. She's now coming off the bench. She had 6 points, 3 boards, 3 assists, but also 3 turnovers. McKinley Dallin, Washington native who transferred to Gonzaga from Minnesota. She had 0 points on 0 of 6 shooting. She did have 8 rebounds, but just could not get a shot to fall. This team's depth right now is a major issue and something that could really trip them up when they get into conference play, which is what's next. That's what's next for this team. They begin conference play on Thursday on the road at San Francisco. I believe they go to San Diego after that. Come back around at home. I think their first home WCC game is against Oregon State, who again was in the Elite 8 last year, although this is basically a completely new roster from that team. But this is the opportunity for the Zags. Because right now, the University of Portland, they're 11-0. They're having a great season. The Zags are probably no longer favored to win the WCC. And at this point, if they don't win the WCC, hard to know if they're going to make the NCAA tournament. My gut says probably not. If they win every single game between now and the WCC tournament, lose the championship game in Vegas, maybe they make it as an at-large bid, but that's probably the only way. So this team is in dire straits right now, need to find a way to win this conference, put themselves in a position to go dancing once again. That starts the path to the championship, the path to a number 1 seed in the WCC at least, starts on Thursday against San Francisco. We'll get you ready for that game later this week. For now, though, that's going to wrap it up for us here on the Locked On Zags podcast. I want to thank all of you so much who have made this show your first listen or your first watch of the day. Better days ahead for the men's team. I know they're coming. We got some previews for their upcoming games here. Hopefully we can right the ship just like last year. Stick with us here. We'll talk about the AP poll, get some mailbag questions answered on Tuesday's show before getting you ready for the rest of the games this week. Thanks again, folks. And until next time, as always, go Zags.